Good. Appreciate it. Okay, great. So let's get started. So stories of the prophets, yay, right? It's obviously everybody's favorite subject because it's stories, but not just because it's a favorite subject. It's a lot of the Quran, 1/3 or more of the Quran is around the stories of the prophets. So when you really understand the stories of the prophets, it helps you understand the Quran, right? Quran is not a storybook. So there are stories in it. There are stories of the prophets in it, but it's not a storybook. It's, as we discussed earlier in our first session, Quran is a non-linear book, right? It's not linear. So how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala embed stories within the Quran? Can anybody tell me?
He uses like the stories to convey a message or a learning.
Yeah. Yes, it's the wisdoms that we need to learn from the stories is what the focus is. Has anybody ever read the Old Testament? Like glanced at it at all? No? It's pretty boring. And I'm not saying that to denigrate it, okay? By the way, what is our stance on the Old Testament and the New Testament? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that we should neither reject it nor we should accept it. Meaning we don't necessarily believe everything what's in there, but we don't reject it either. Okay, so you should have a relationship with that as well, because that's part of our continued Sharia of Islam. It is called. It's sometimes in the derivation of rulings, which is the ahkam, the fiqh. Okay, this is called al-shar'u man qablana. It is the Sharia of those who were before us. Okay, so it's good to have that understanding. It also helps you do dawah a little bit better when you understand the Jews and the Christians better. It helps you a lot with the dawah, and familiarity with the Old and the New Testament is, I believe, an important element, at least familiarity with it, because otherwise you will have zero credibility when you're speaking to a Jew or a Christian. Like think about a non-Muslim speaking to you, and when they tell you, have you read the Quran, and they say no, then what are you going to think about them? It's like, what do I tell this guy, right? Or this gal, right? How can I even begin? They have zero interest in the deen, and they're trying to come and argue with me, right? Similarly, just switch it around. If you had zero familiarity with the Old Testament and the New Testament, and you're trying to argue with the Jew and Christian, and they might throw something at you, and you're gonna go, oh wait, I don't even know what they're talking about. How do I even begin? So it becomes dawah seen a challenge. You understand? So it's good to have that familiarity. Okay, with that said, just remember this. Rasulullah SAW did not tell us not to read it. He said, actually, is essentially he's saying is, don't reject everything in there and don't fully believe everything in there, which means we need to be familiar with it. Okay, so this is from the advice of Rasulullah SAW. Okay, as it so happens, since there was a Jew, a lot of Muslims came out of the Jews, right? In Medina, a lot of the Jews became Muslims. They had their understanding of the Old Testament and the New Testament as well, and the Christians as well. And then there was an influx of Judeo-Christian influence in the early Islam. When the Muslim empire grew, they had a relationship with the Jews and Christians, right? So a lot of their ideas kind of crept in. The Quran does not provide a lot of details about the stories of the prophets, and you will see that, okay? Inshallah ta'ala, if we go really, really slowly, you'll be able to see that. If we rush through, you wouldn't necessarily see that. My goal is not really to rush through the stories. My goal is to really bring the Quran back to you, right? That's the whole purpose why I'm even doing the stories of the prophets. The whole goal is what? So once you understand the stories and its detail and its intricacies, then you understand their placements and their rationale behind where they occur in the Quran and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about them to begin with. Okay, so that's really the goal. So what I was saying was the stories of the prophets, the Quran does not provide a lot of detail, but if you look at the Old Testament, there's going to be a lot of detail, right? It's going to have a whole family tree of Nuh alayhi salam. It's going to have a whole family tree of Ibrahim alayhi salam. It's going to have the names of places and towns and the insignificant characters and the major characters and this person and that person. There's just so many names, so many names of places, so many names of people, so many events, so many things. It just gets overwhelming, right? It becomes extremely dense to understand. So if you look at, for example, the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, if you look at the Quran, how many names are mentioned in Surah Yusuf? How many names are mentioned? Does anybody know? 2 names. Yusuf alayhi salam and his father Yaqub alayhi salam. That's it. If you look at the same story of Joseph, the chapter of Joseph in Old Testament, there will be so many names. Okay. For example, if you guys have familiarity with the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, Joseph, what was his younger brother's name? The youngest of the 12. What was his name? Does anybody know?
Binyamin.
Yes, excellent, Ryan. Binyamin, and in English, it's called, the anglicized version of that name is called
Benjamin.
Benjamin. That's right. Is that mentioned in the Quran? No. Okay. It says his brother. Okay, because they were from the same mother. What was the name of the mother in the Quran? No mention. What's the name of the mother in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible? Does anybody know? Rachel, I think. Rachel or Rebecca, one of those, I forget. Okay, anyway, my point is you don't find a lot of detail in the Quran. We do get detail. Where do we get detail from? We get the detail from the Sunnah, from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam directly told us, or we understand that from the companions of the Prophet, and they are telling us something, which we then understand that how would they know it unless Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them, right? So we understand that from the hadith literature and the Athari literature. And we also have then the Tabi'un, the opinions of Ibn Abbas and the early scholars of Islam, which were the companions or their followers. So that's where we learn some details, okay? Now, be careful though, still, those things that we learn about the details of the prophets, right? What was this person's name or that person's name, or what was the name of the town, or when it exactly took place, or other details which are not mentioned in the Quran. Some of them, just keep this in mind, some of them might have crept into Islam and the Sunnah from the Jews and the Christians. Why? I told you, because of the interaction, right? And you understand that from their understanding. So some of those thoughts have crept in. So oftentimes, a lot of the stories of the prophets contains detail that, you need to take that with a grain of salt, is all I'm going to say. You understand? Okay. Even though there's authentic chains going to an opinion of Ibn Abbas, or authentic chains that are mentioned in the tafsir of the Quran, in the really, really rich encyclopedic tafsir of the Quran of the early scholars, tafsir of Tabari and Qurtubi and Baghawi and all of these other early tafsir. Take that with a grain of salt, okay? Don't get lost and confused by it. Just get the general understanding, okay? What is it that you need to affirm for sure is whatever is the authentic hadith directly from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not necessarily from the tertiary opinions and those kinds of things, okay? But with that said, there is a lot of content here. Unfortunately, not a lot of people have done a lot of work on the stories of the prophets. There isn't a lot of work done on it, even though it's like 1/3 of the Quran, if I'm not correct, if I'm not wrong. 1/3 of the Quran is on the stories of the prophets, and there's loads and loads and loads of ahadith around some of details of some aspects of some of the stories, right? But again, take it with a grain of salt. Now, the book that we're going to use as an anchor is called Al-Bidayah wa-Nihaya. Okay, Al-Bidayah wa-Nihaya. Let me type it for you so you guys can Google it if you want to. Al-Bidayah wa al-Nihaya. What does it mean? I told you guys that earlier at the beginning. The beginning and the end. Okay, and this is by the scholar Ibn Kathir. That same Ibn Kathir that wrote the famous Tafsir Ibn Kathir. This is just the nickname of that Tafsir. It has another name. I forget what that it is. Well, what it's called, I can find out if you guys are curious. You can Google it too. But this is by the famous same Ibn Kathir. He wrote this huge, voluminous work, which contains the stories of the prophets. He didn't do it just for the stories of the prophets. It contains, the beginning of the creation. It is a whole section, by the way, if you guys were curious from the last lecture, Arsh and the creation of the Arsh, the throne, and the Kursi, and what is that, and creation of the six creation in 6 days, and the 7 skies, and the creation of the universe, and what was there. It's all in there. Okay, it's all in there. So those of you who are curious, I'm pointing you back to that book. Okay, its first volume is called the Early Days. Okay, let's take a quick look at that. A lot of what I'm going to discuss came from that. So this is my library, by the way. Oh, you guys can see my screen, right?
No.
Yeah. So it's called the Early Days of it. So this is, I'll just go to the top here. The Early Days, taken from Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. This is the Darus Salam translation. And if you look at the contents, you will see it has a biography of Ibn Kathir as well. And then it talks about the Kursi and the tablet and the creation of the heavens and the earth. And it talks about the creation and everything else that is inside the universe, what's between them, et cetera, okay? And it also then contains the story of the prophets, like story of Hud, story of Ibrahim, all of that is in here. It's in the Early Days volume, but there's many other volumes, right? Then there's the whole Sirah. He has the whole Sirah section of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in there, and then it has, after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the story of the Khulafa Rashidun, the righteous caliphs, and after that what happened, and then the dynasties of the Umayyad dynasty, all the way up to his time. And then he ends it with the signs of the Day of Judgment and the Day of Judgment details on that too. So all of that is in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. It's a really large collection of content. Very nice as well. There's a lot of references, obviously from the Quran, but a lot of references from the Hadith literature. Try to find a version that kind of shows you if a hadith is being quoted, is it an authentic hadith or is it a weak hadith? Or sometimes he included some really weak traditions as well. He included that in there. So be careful when you read it. You have to kind of know in order to be able to not get too lost. Okay, so find a version that contains the references and somebody who has authenticated some of the information in there. So this version, this PDF that I have actually does that. Okay,